I'm glad you could join me. And I'm going to turn that off. There's a lot going on the screen. This is my first time using Riverside, so pardon me.
It can only get better. No worries.
Well, since I'm not sure how much there of a crossover it is between my audience and yours. I'm sure there's some. I know that there are some people from that are I see in my chats who I also see in yours. But for those who have not had the pleasure of meeting you yet, tell everybody about yourself and about the Sci-Fi Savage.
Yeah, so I have a YouTube channel called The Sci-Fi Savage where I talk all things Star Trek. I spend a lot of time talking about Star Trek The Next Generation and Star Trek Voyager because those are the ones I grew up with. So they're kind of near and dear to my heart. But we talk all things Star Trek, and we've got people in the chat for all the series from the original series back in the 60s to the current reiterations, which we keep getting new ones all the time, which is so cool because I don't know if you knew this, but that some of the newer shows like Prodigy and stuff like that, I am
Mhm.
meeting people regularly. That is their entrance into Star Trek. Like
I
that's where they start, which
I
is like,
love that too. I
who
love
knew?
that.
Right? I was shocked because I thought, oh, this is only for fans. Like they're not going to bring in the new people. Totally wrong. People are coming into the new shows and then working their way back, which just makes me
And
really happy.
that is what I've always wanted because I'm a little bit older than you, I'm sure. And my thing is I want Star Trek to be around when my grandchildren come of age, even if I'm not here to shove it down their throats. And the only way that you can do that is by drawing in that new audience. So
Hmm.
for the people who are older and have gotten used to the old way of things, basically, I want them to loosen up because I'm like, they can't continue to just make things for us. It has to bring in a new audience, or Star Trek dies with us, and
Yes.
we don't
And
want
we don't
that.
want that. Yeah,
I
exactly. We don't
really,
want that. We want to keep going.
I am so glad that you said that to me because that gives me hope.
Yeah,
Okay,
I was shocked and pleasantly surprised. I do love all things sci-fi, but there's just something about Star Trek that touches my heart.
so what inspired you to start your channel?
So the channel came from a podcast that I started back in 2020 with one of my best friends. It's called the TNG Podcast. It is an episode by episode review of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Me and one of my best friends, we were both middle school teachers at the time, and the whole country went into lockdown. So we were doing distance learning. We were teaching our kids on Zoom. So we suddenly had all of this free energy from not being in that commute. So we were like, wow, what do we want to do today? Like when we would finish the school day, we were just buzzing. So we had both wanted to start podcasts for a while and we were talking about it. And she was like, why don't we just start one together? And then I was like, what could it possibly be about? So we immediately went to some of our favorite shows from the 90s that we would love talking about over and over and over. Some of our favorite shows from the 2000s that we would love talking over and over. And we were like, what about this one? What about this one? What about this one? And somehow we landed on Star Trek, which has, like I said, a near and dear place to both of our hearts. We both watched the show growing up with our dads, and both of our dads have passed away. So for both of us, it's like this nostalgia thing that we just really vibe with. So we're like, okay, let's try this for a little bit and see how it goes. So we reviewed every single episode, 178 episodes, plus we did a few bonus episodes in there. And by the end of it, we were both like, oh my gosh, I did not realize how much I loved science fiction. Like I've always liked it, but it wasn't until digging in scene by scene. And then I also had a science fiction club on Clubhouse, which was also popular during lockdown. And I had a couple thousand people there, and we would do watch parties and we would do conversations a couple times a week for like ever. And I got introduced to sci-fi short stories, which I did not know was a thing before. A bunch more novels because we would do short story Sunday where we would just read stories together, and a bunch of new shows, a bunch of new movies. Plus, I feel like we're in a sci-fi revolution. I don't know if you feel that,
I
but
think so.
it's like every streaming service is like, let's try out a couple sci-fi shows. Let's just see how it goes.
Hmm.
So all of that combined to make the perfect storm of just joy, right? Every time I'm seeing something, it's so much fun. Um, so yeah, the long way to answer your question, that's what happened is we started that podcast. That podcast has since finished because we reviewed all the episodes.
Right.
And then I started a YouTube channel because I want to keep talking. I'm not done talking about it. I thought I'd be over it. I'd be like, I probably have nothing more to say, but for some reason, every
You
week,
never get
girl, I
over
have
it.
more to say. We've been doing the podcast for 3 years. I still have more to say.
That is why I feel like, as horrible as the COVID era was, it was a gift in a lot of ways because a lot of voices, not polished, uh, canned messages, but really heartfelt conversations between friends, we would have never heard because everybody suddenly had a camera and a mic. And it's like, okay, what else can
And a
I do?
lot of spare time.
Yeah. And I'm so very glad that we got you out of that. You and what's her name? Andrea?
Andrea.
What is your
Andrea. Yeah.
Andrea? Yeah. Well, I'm glad we got you guys out of that because honestly, I do more audio podcasts than I do YouTube, but I discovered you through another channel on YouTube. So I have 170, a little less now because I have listened to a few of your conversations on the podcast, which information is going to be down in the description of this video. Every place that you can find Sharice. But yeah, going back, I um I found you guys through YouTube, and I truly do enjoy what you bring and the enthusiasm that you bring to the conversations because there's always a wonderful theme, and it's not just I'm just gonna sit down and I'm more philosophical. So I'm like, I'm gonna sit and we're gonna talk about the philosophy behind why this or that or this. You talk about philosophical things, but you also talk about like the common things, the things that are prescient to everybody, which is relationships, which is what is scarier, which was the scarier episode, which episode would I enjoy your conversation. So okay, I just had to go out and fangirl for just a second
Oh,
because
thank you
we
so
got to give you
much.
flowers. We got to give you flowers while you're
Thank you
here.
so much. I really appreciate that. I do try to bring. I think we, just being who we are bringing a unique voice to the science fiction conversation, and I love that because not only is it unique and it's refreshing. In fact, I had one of my podcast listeners. He sent us this long email, and he was like, he's from, I think he's in Australia, but he grew up he grew up watching the show, having to get people from America to like ship him tapes so that he could, because he
Wow.
grew up watching the original series, so they had to like ship him the VHS or whatever it was at the time, because I don't think it was VHS, to put into like his system, and he had some kind of adapter so that it could work with like the American stuff, so he could watch the show. So this was like before streaming, y'all, when you had to walk to school uphill both ways in the snow with no shoes.
Yeah, that was
That's
me.
what he had to do to watch Star Trek. And he emailed and he was like, I really love listening to you and Andrea because I'm a middle-aged white guy and I already know what I think. And he was saying, I feel like the space is just overwhelmed with me and I'm just hearing my own thoughts over and over. And you guys are so refreshing because you're women of color. We're both scientists as our background, and we bring something unique to the conversation. But what I also love about you and I being able to bring our uniqueness is that all we have to do is be ourselves.
Yeah.
How, what a relief. Like, finally, working so hard for so much of my life to try to break into areas and, being a representative of my people, whether I want to or not. This is
Right.
the time when I just get to be myself. And I really feel celebrated for just being myself and having my own experiences and points of view. And that alone is unique and different and novel. It's nothing extra. And I'm so grateful that we're living in a day and age where we can do that, and where social media is a thing and YouTube's a thing. And I don't have to get permission from anyone, from the studios or the networks or anyone,
Right.
to share my opinion. It's such a blessing.
Okay, so that is, I guess that's something that worked, like you said, it works in our favor because we had been underrepresented in the nerd sphere. A lot of people, especially for me, growing up, I couldn't be very open about being a nerd because if you tell people you're a nerd, it's just like asking for it.
Yeah.
In the '90s,
Yeah.
the late '80s, early '90s. So, have you faced any challenges, any obstacles in your endeavors online or off?
Yeah. Actually, I haven't. I mean, I have in life, but in sci fi, no.
Yeah,
And I
right.
think, again, going back to the silver lining for the horrible cloud that was COVID, there are a lot of things that have happened over the last few years, like the Black Lives Matter movement, that have made people go, wait, racism is still happening? And you're like, yes, boo. But the good thing is people are like, oh, I don't want that to happen anymore. I want to do things differently. So I think I've also come in to the space in the perfect time in that sense, because people are going out of their way to highlight diverse voices
Mm-hmm.
and not just, the Black Lives Matter movement didn't just doesn't just benefit Black lives, but it's a lot of underrepresented people
Mm-hmm.
um, are becoming, more spotlighted because people are saying, wow, everything was pretty homogenous. We do want diversity. We do want to hear from different people who think differently or look differently or have different orientations or different viewpoints. And so now it's kind of fashionable
Right.
to hear from people who are different from the majority, from like the mainstream of what we've heard before. So thankfully I haven't had the experience that you've had because the culture and the day
You
and
haven't
age
been. Oh yeah, the
has
culture has
changed.
flipped. Right.
It's flipped to be like it's cool now. It's cool to hear from different voices versus like it's not cool to hear from nerds, and especially if you're in these other underrepresented groups, like even more so is it not cool. Like you're going to be rejected by literally everyone. Now it's kind of the opposite. So I'm really really blessed in that sense. And I'm trying to ride that wave until it turns around cuz like it could turn around. So let
And
me
then
just ride it.
the one thing that I can be certain about is I have a lot of trust in this next generation. Now I know that there are things that we have to kind of still steer them in the right, I guess, in the right direction. But these kids are thinking beyond what some of us, or at least for me, in my generation, that 90s generation, I came up in the Diddy generation, So these kids are thinking beyond that. They're not finding themselves pigeonholed by the things that we went through as young people. And I am so proud of the youth that we've got today. So it's good to know also that it is not just the really young ones, that the way has been made easier for you as well.
Yes, it's like it's all of the effort of the people who've gone before me. It's the ingenuity of the younger people who are creating the technologies that I'm using, right? Because YouTube was invented back in my day, but social media influencers was not, right? Like that's the new people who are creating a whole job description that didn't exist before that now I can take advantage of because they made it, right? So it's kind of like this really cool flow back and forth that's just a perfect storm of goodness in this exact moment. So we're like living in the best time, I think, for the two of us to be content creators, especially in this space.
Yeah. Um, Surprise, surprise. But I went live instead. I thought I just hit record. But so we did have our my friend Clarence from Discussing Trek, and I was just about to talk about him because I was going to ask, was there any shows or anybody that inspired you to say I'm going to hit record? Because Clarence was the
Was
first
your inspiration?
Star Trek. His Discussing Trek was the first Star Trek podcast that I listened to and resonated with. And I listened and listened so long, and then I'm like, I got stuff to say, and they can't hear me. So I better get a microphone. And so thank you, Clarence. And I promise you I didn't know you were here. And was there anybody like that for you?
Um, I don't think there was anybody because I wasn't listening to podcasts when we decided to have this idea. I hadn't been listening to podcasts for years, and but my best friend, she listened to a ton of them. So I think she was probably more inspired by the people she was listening to want to say, I want to share my piece. I'm just kind of an opinionated person. I just like to talk. I just like to share my thoughts.
Well, we like to
And
listen.
and the thing about giving me a microphone is like, especially after I became a podcaster, it was kind of like, if you don't want to hear what I have to say, do not give me a microphone because
Mute.
I'm going to tell you what I have to say with or without it. But if I get it, I'm just going to tell you louder and longer. So I just think I've always kind of been that way, but definitely. So, but that's podcasting, right? That's audio podcasting where people can't see my face. And we did most of almost every single episode we recorded in our pajamas, so it was just kind of like very casual. I don't do it like that on YouTube. I like put on a grown-up shirt. I don't just wear my pajamas, um, brush my hair or whatever. So that it really was kind of just I learned this stat from my friend who's a social media manager at this big university. She told me that on all the social media platforms, 98% of the users are consumers.
Hmm.
2% actually make the content. And I thought that can't be right because I'm on here on TikTok watching millions and millions of people as I swipe. But she's like, yes, look at any platform. The stats are about the same for every platform. And I thought, well, that sounds like opportunity to me.
Yeah.
Only 2% of people on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, pick a thing, anything, only 2% are actually creating content. Everyone else is consuming. And I was
Hmm.
like, why not be part of the 2% instead of part of the 98, right?
Exactly.
It's harder, it takes more effort and work, but it's also it's going to give more impact. Like if I'm listening and I'm watching these videos that some of them are great, right? And some of them are not great. But the point is we all have the opportunity. To what I was saying
Right.
earlier, we don't need permission from anyone. If you have a
Hmm.
smartphone, you can just talk. If you talk crazy, you will get banned, but that is your
Yeah.
choice. You know what I mean? Like
Consequences.
you had the choice
Look
to
at
say
that.
something crazy in the first
Consequences of
place.
your own actions.
Exactly. You had your own actions to take. You could take the actions. So it was more just like hearing those stats and seeing a lot of content creators that I thought were great and realizing that only 2% of us, only 2% of people are out here sharing their own opinions. And I've seen videos from as you have, I'm sure as well, from really polished and beautiful, highly produced, to just people sitting in their car, turning on their phone and being like, you know what? I was
Yeah.
thinking, I saw this video on TikTok. This girl was like, I was thinking about that saying, you can't have your cake and eat it too. And I finally got it. Because if you eat your cake, you don't have it anymore because you ate it. I was like, that's right. I mean, something like that, something just so casual, but it benefited my life. So I
And
just,
somebody, there is an audience for it.
yeah.
Somebody is looking for this type of content. I wanted to know put it in the search bar. What about that saying, have your cake and eat it too? I want to know about that. And that video comes up. So yay for them.
And only that video because the 98% of other people haven't made a video about it.
Right. So where was I going? So we have no obstacles. I can see that you incorporate an awful lot of your personality, maybe not cultural experiences, but even sometimes if we just look at it from the standpoint of uh, our Y chromosome, when we add that into our uh, the mix of what we have to say, does any of that color how you present your stuff on the Sci-Fi Savage? Sorry.
So a couple things. One, it's the X chromosome for us. Just I'm a scientist, so I had to say that.
Wow.
I
Yes,
had to say
you're
that.
right. Yes.
But yes, so in the podcast, I was always bringing up my cultural experience, my just being a woman, my background, the things I've personally witnessed or seen, or people that I know. It was a little bit easier in that format because it was a little easier in that format because the show's really long, right? Like it's like 45 minutes was a short show for us. Like we by the time we ended the show, it was like 90-minute episodes or whatever. So I had plenty of time, and also with Andrea, oh sorry, we had plenty of time to kind of say what was this like for you, or have you experienced that? It's a little harder on the YouTube channel where it's just me talking to myself until I hear back from other people. Um, so I do try to incorporate my experiences in everything. Sometimes that's my experience as a Black woman in America. Sometimes that's my experience as a scientist in the lab. Sometimes that's my experience as a teacher in the classroom, where I'm like, what? Like that wouldn't work in a class, or like that's exactly what you do with students or whatever. So I always try to make it a part of it. Now my short videos, it's not there at all because those are like 30 seconds long. So there's
Yeah.
no space. There's like no space for my personality other than in the comedy, in the jokes. But with the longer episodes, like the live streams and stuff like that, I try to incorporate more of my viewpoint than my experiences. Meaning, for example, I have this video called "The Most Traumatized Kids in Space," and it's about all the kids serving on the Enterprise in Star Trek: The Next Generation, because I just think it's nuts to have kids on that ship. I just think it's totally nuts. Like it's crazy.
Yeah,
Like this
it
is the
probably wasn't the
flagship.
best idea.
Y'all are going after the Borg, the Romulans, the Cardassians. Every time you turn around, it's being blown up. Why are kids on this ship? Like that should just not be a thing. So I did a whole video about how ridiculous it is to have kids on this ship and how these kids must be so traumatized. Um, and so even though that doesn't have like me as a Black woman or as a teacher or any of that in there, it does have my viewpoint, right? Like my point of
Right.
view on this topic of what I think makes sense or does not make sense in this universe. And I think that's the part that everyone can relate to. Not everyone can relate to being a Black woman scientist, um, though I do my best. But I think everyone can relate to some of these other kind of take a step back issues where you're like, wait a minute, why are children put in terrible danger? And and I always get comments where people are like, well, because people don't want to be separated from their families. And I'm like, dude, they go back to Earth every other day. Like,
And
don't, y'all are not Voyager. You're not stranded. They go
they're
back to
not
Earth all the
forced
time.
to be in Starfleet. It's like Starfleet
It's
is a
voluntary.
choice. So when you start having children,
Make a
you make
different
a different
choice.
choice.
Be on a space station. Like,
Right,
be on a planet. Like, there's options. You
exactly.
don't need to be on this ship. Yeah. Anyways,
Especially the Enterprise.
especially the Enterprise. Be on any other ship. This is just like the worst choice.
So we're getting our fifth and final season of Star Trek Lower Decks. Now, how much Lower Decks? Because I know the last time I checked, you weren't all the way through. But
No,
how much Lower Decks have you gotten into?
I think I'm halfway through season 3. So I'm
Okay,
going to have to finish all of them before season 5 starts, which I think is
and
next week at the time of this recording.
this
So, but
Thursday coming.
the
Yeah,
episodes are only 20 minutes long, so
yeah.
shouldn't take that long.
So are you excited? Are you?
I
How have you
am
been feeling about
excited.
Lower
I
Decks?
am excited. I like this. I really like the show, and I've been hearing mixed comments. I wonder what if you've heard anything from people and their views on Lower Decks, but I've heard like mixed things. Some people are like, I think for the majority, most people are like, "Oh, I really like the show and I'm so sad it's over." But a handful of people are just like, "I hate this show. I hate everything about the show." And I'm like, "Clutch my pearls. How could you hate this show? It's like a love letter to fans. It's just all the Easter eggs and I think it's so fun." And people are like, "Who cares about Easter eggs? It's just like slapstick comedy and it's dumb." And I'm like, but it's so funny. Like it's dumb funny,
So
like
you
so
talked
I
to season one Tasha, because season one Tasha was not on board.
well, we only got one season of Tasha, right? Cuz she didn't make it to the end of the season.
I'm
Um
Tasha.
oh, season 1 Tasha. I thought you were talking about sorry. I thought you were talking about
Yeah, season
TNG.
one
That's
of
why I was like
Lower
she didn't make
Decks.
it. Oh, okay.
I think I need to make it. Yeah, season one of Lower Decks. I was not feeling the Cerritos or anybody
So
on
how did
that
you get
ship
to season 2?
because I still gave it a chance, and I
Oh.
was still reviewing the episodes.
See,
So I
most
was
people
like, I'm
don't
gonna give it a
do
chance.
that. Cuz you gave it a chance for the whole season to
Hmm.
another See, most people don't do that.
Yeah,
That's a big
it's
commitment.
it's Star Trek. You have to give it a chance. So by the middle of season two, I was on board.
Okay.
They won me
Wow.
over.
That
Yeah,
took a
but
minute.
yeah,
That
it
took a
did.
minute.
It was all the way up until the episode where I think that was Wedge Douche.
Yeah, I don't know how to say that one, but I know the one you're talking
Yeah,
about.
you know what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
That's the episode that I was like, okay, so y'all can be smart, And then everything after that, it seems like we just watched this crew go from uh, the most
Inept?
irresponsible lower deckers to now they're junior officers, and we're maturing every season with them as the audience. So I'm like, okay, I think I get what you guys were trying to do here now, and I'm here for it.
Wow.
Clarence says season four was great. It took forever to grow on him as well.
I
Me
don't
and
understand how
him,
you guys are sticking with it. I really
we
don't.
would join
Cuz
up together and like beat this show up together. But yeah, I actually am enjoying it now. And then we got some news out of New York Comic Con about Academy. Starfleet Academy is getting a second season before the first one even comes
I was
out.
like, "Wait, what?" We haven't seen
Yeah.
the first one. Okay, so I
And,
want to know who are the tester audiences because I need to be one of them.
oh,
Like
please.
I need to be a tester because I can help them. Well, I don't know. People might not all agree with my opinion, but I will have some strong opinions if that's what they need for the
Right.
direction for their shows. Because, like, they greenlit it because clearly it tested well.
Yeah.
So, if you're looking for testers,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm down.
I'm your girl. I can be one. And Tatiana Maslany, who is from Orphan Black, She Hulk. She has joined the cast. I'm excited about that.
Ooh. Oh, this is gonna
Yeah.
be fun. This is gonna be fun.
I don't know what character she's going to be playing. Of course, they haven't announced her character yet, but it matters not. I love Tatiana Maslany.
Thank you. I was like, it doesn't really. I mean, I'm like, well, maybe she'll be an educator. Maybe she'll be an admin. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter
Yeah,
who. She's gonna be
yeah,
great. Maybe she'll be the
it's
bad
her.
guy. How fun would that be?
Oh my. Then there's the big news for me because I'm a Michelle Yeoh fanatic, and
I
that
love
is
her.
the date we finally got for Section 31. Now, how do you feel? Are you excited for that?
Oh, I'm so excited.
Ambivalent?
First of
Good.
all, Michelle Yeoh can do anything. I'm watching it. Okay? Like, put her in anything. I'm
Yeah.
there. I'm there. I'm watching it. Put her in Star Trek. I'm watching it harder. Like, I'm there. So as soon as I saw the trailer, I was like, say less. I'm in. Plus,
Yes.
I like actiony type, I like that sort of thing. We were talking earlier about Marvel. I like actiony sort of things. So I'm super excited. I could see people, me and my friends were talking about it. And some were like, "Oh, do you feel like it's like not really Star Trek enough? It's just kind of like a cool action movie that's loosely affiliated with Star Trek." And I was like, "I'll take that. I'm okay with that."
There have been a lot of questions. And of course, I don't have the answers. I'm not Sway, but I that has been a big question for a lot of people. And the question was, is this really Star Trek? Or is this something entirely different? But I feel like there is no way that they would put this under the Star Trek umbrella if it doesn't come back around in some way. But this is a character who was introduced to us from Star Trek Discovery.
Hmm.
And if she is still playing the same character and she comes over in this movie and she's still portraying that character in the way that we last left her, it's still Star Trek. So I'm excited to see where else she could take Philippa Georgiou.
I also feel like because Section 31 is like, like the Black Ops, secret, whatever, I feel like they can go in a different direction. Kind of like with Discovery. They had the ability to go in a different direction. They did kind of like boomerang back around and try to,
Yeah.
root themselves more in canon. But we can do something different. We can be like, this is Star Trek, but the dark side, the side you never see, you never
Mhm.
hear about this, which would make total sense in any kind of military organization, even though, Picard said we're not a military organization. They are. So like we would expect it to not all be front facing where everyone sees everything above board. There should be some secret stuff and some, stealthy stuff, which gives them the ability to not make it feel like a Star Trek movie or feel like a Star Trek episode. It can feel totally different, but it was birthed out of this universe. I'm
Yeah,
okay with that. Like I
I'm good too.
I can't think of a Michelle Yeoh movie I've seen that I hate. So putting a lot of pressure on her shoulders, but I'm feeling like it can't go wrong.
No, I really love that lady. In I am with you with this. It's still Star Trek. We knew that Section 31 existed, and if they want to expand on the lore, that's what the lore is for.
Yeah,
You
that's
don't
what it's
keep
for.
everything
Put more
in a
in
box.
there. Put more
Yeah,
in there. Let us know. Give us some backstory. Give us more history.
right.
Do it all. Yeah.
Well, and I'm trying to think what else. Did anything else come out? This movie they keep threatening us with. We're probably not getting the movie. Even though I've just read an article,
Which
like
movie?
as I was waiting for you, Zoe Saldana did an article for Variety. I encourage everybody to read that article because it is a phenomenal take on the person Zoe Saldana. But she also went into like, and we've been waiting on this movie. She's like, and I used to just sit and wait because they would be like, okay, we're going to be doing another movie. So she would sit and wait. She's like, now I'm not waiting. So she's doing other things in between. And I guess that means that we should move around too. So that's what I'll be doing. I'll be moving around while we wait for that.
Well, whenever
Um,
they're ready, I'll watch that too.
yeah, I'll
And
watch
they
it.
know that. This is why they're rebooting. This is why they put so much money into rebooting this franchise, is because it's had a loyal fan base from the 60s.
Yeah.
And you can't buy that. You can't buy 30 plus year loyalty and then reboot it 30 years later. Like once you have a franchise like that, it's just, it becomes a cash cow. Which
It,
sometimes I feel like they sometimes take advantage of us Trekkies because they know we're going to show up and
it's
maybe they
just
don't
like the
always do
Star
their best
Wars
work.
fandom.
Yeah, it's exactly
Star
like the
Wars
Star Wars
fandom.
fandom.
We are twins.
You're gonna go. You're gonna see it.
Hmm.
Whether even if it's not good, you're gonna watch every single episode just to complain about it. But
Yep.
you feel
Just to have
obligated
something to talk
because you're a
about.
fan. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I'll watch
So
it.
hopes you got hopes for the future of Star Trek? Do you have any hopes for your YouTube? Your if I can get my mouth to work, do you have any hopes for your YouTube channel? Or uh, tell me how you would like in a perfect world. how would you like for things to go for your channel and for Star Trek?
Oh, what a great question. Um, I was a little nervous at first with the reboots of Star Trek when they came out with Star Trek Picard. I was like, I remember seeing the posters and being like, am I excited or not excited? Because I was like, I want to see more of this story, but I also don't want them to ruin my childhood. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. Maybe I want you to do a different story. Maybe don't do Picard, just do anybody else. Um, but then when it came out and then all the other shows came out, I was like, this is glorious because Star Wars also did the same thing, right? They had a ton of shows come out, so many
Yeah.
shows come out and which I also watched a bunch of those. I'm not as big of a Star Wars person as a Star Trek person, but I do like that franchise. And I loved Mandalorian season 1,
Oh, for
which I never
sure.
would have gotten if they hadn't done a bunch of reboots. I never would have
Yep.
gotten that show. Fell in love with
Mhm.
little Grogu. Little baby Yoda is the cutest thing ever. We would have never got baby Yoda. Like I'm so glad they
Right.
did that. And so that initial like, oh, I don't know if maybe they're ruining a perfect thing or whatever. I was thinking in my head. Now I'm just like what you were saying earlier in this conversation. I'm like, this is great because for me, it's bringing in new lore, new content, new stories, new adventures, which is fun, and we get to see the feel of Star Trek, but updated, like modernized. And
Hmm.
I think Star Trek Discovery is the perfect example that it's very emotional and it encapsulates the emotions of what people are going through right now. Like this is how people are feeling, this is how people are talking, this is how people are interacting. So it's like let's take these modern emotions but put them under the lens of Star Trek, which I think is really fun. Like it's a mirror of the times, which I felt like TNG
Right.
was as well. Um,
And the TOS as well.
and
Mirror
TOS
of the
as well.
time.
It's a
Yep.
mirror of the time, exactly. It's
Mhm.
a mirror of the time with a little futuristic sheen,
Yep.
which is fantastic because it allows us to have deeper conversations about serious issues, but with this backdrop of like future fantasy. um it takes the bite out of those conversations so they don't feel so personal. It's like, oh, we're not talking about global warming, we're talking about what happened to this planet. You know what I mean? Like it
I,
makes it easier.
I really
um
enjoyed that point that you just made. That is because I never know how to respond to people when they make that complaint. Oh, the emotions, the times that we're in require us to look at things through the lens of emotionality. I would have never put it that way. So thank you,
yeah,
because now
you're welcome.
I have a sword in my arsenal to use when they say that.
Yeah, no one's gonna agree with you though. They're still gonna complain.
Me and
And
you.
that's fine. And that's fine. Like it's not for everybody. But here's the thing. When people are like, oh, I don't like actually I had somebody in my live stream the other day who was like, I don't like these new Star Treks. I don't like the new ones. And I was like, well, buddy, there's a lot of new ones. Have you tried them all? Because there's a
Right.
lot. Like don't watch one or two episodes of one or two shows and be like, I don't like the new ones. I'm sticking with the old. There's so many. And I mean, Tasha, you did a whole season and a half of a show before you got into it, and now you're glad you did, and you're
Hmm.
enjoying the rest of the show. Like, there's all this to say. This is a really long way to say I'm so excited about the reboots and that they keep trying different things and bringing on new casts and having different conversations. I love that. I am super excited to see where that goes. I never I never saw this coming before a couple years ago. Like a reboot was just not in my brain. And now I'm like, how could we not have new ones from time to time, you know?
Right.
So I'm super excited about that. I don't know what my future vision is for Star Trek, but I love that it's becoming more mainstream and I love that it's continuing to bring in new audiences. That's super exciting. And then for my channel, um, I have so many fun things in my mind planned for just the next year that I would love to just have. I feel like if you love Star Trek, you should be in my community. Period. The end. Like this is where you belong. And so I
Hmm.
have all these plans for creating a bigger community and my phrase for the upcoming year is epic experiences. So I just want to create these incredible experiences for my audience, for myself, for my friends and family and record it and share it with people. So yeah, I have a lot of big visions for mostly just bringing communities together, especially people like us who maybe felt like you didn't have a ton of people to geek out with
Yeah.
about, Star Trek or sci-fi and getting them together so that way you can. And the level of conversation is really fun, right? Because when you
Hmm.
get with people who are super, super nerdy, they're like, in the weeds. They're
They
like, do you
way
remember
in the weeds.
they're in I mean you say something and they're like episode 3, timestamp 2.4
Exactly.
minutes and they're like and they're like, they'll pick something out, and somebody else in the audience will be like, "Yep, I thought the same thing." And it's like, how refreshing, right? Like how affirming to have other
Some
people who
people,
can go there with you.
this encyclopedic, because I have forgotten. I promise I've forgotten more Star Trek than I remember right now at this point. And for some people my age and older to be able to pull those facts out of just thin air, um, no research time, I'm like, wow, they really. I mean, I need to play cards or a Sudoku or something to work on my memory because I should be able to recall like that. But
But
yeah,
here's the great
I
thing,
have
you don't
notes.
have to. That's the beautiful thing
Yeah,
about this is you just go, "What was that again? Tell me in the chat. Who's that? Let me know in the chat. What's that mean? Tell me in the chat." It's so easy with YouTube. You're just like, "I don't know what you're talking about. Please
oh
explain in the
gosh.
chat." And then you know. That's my approach because at first I was like, because I haven't seen every episode of every Star Trek show, which it blows the minds of non-Trekkies, which I find really funny. Because people who watch Star Trek, they're like, "Oh yeah." People who don't, they're like, you have a YouTube channel and a podcast and you haven't seen every episode of every show." And I'm like, "Do you know how many shows there are?" Do you know? Because there's
You,
a lot and a lot of
but your
episodes.
shows were TNG Voyager, as you said. So
Yes, and I've
your
seen those like
knowledge,
hundreds of
that's your
times.
wheelhouse.
That's my wheelhouse. Like, ask me anything about those, and I'm like there. But if
Mhm.
you're pulling stuff out of TOS or taking something from Strange New Worlds or pulling something from Prodigy, I'm like, what are the kids' names again on that show? Like, it's not, to your point, it's just like, it's not right there. But I feel
Mhm.
like I don't need to be because the audience has it, like, collectively they have it. But it always cracks me up that non-Trekkies are the ones who are always like, you haven't watched everything? I can't believe it. Like they're the ones who are kind of gatekeepy
And
versus
that
the
is
real
the
fans who are like, you'll love it, you know?
that's where the imposter syndrome in some people comes from, because I am one of those people. I'm very anxious. I'm a very anxious
Mm.
person, got a lot of anxious energy, and sometimes I feel like I've got it all together, and then somebody will make a comment like what you just said, and it'll be like, oh, I'm been found out. They know now that I don't know what they think I know, and now I'm a fraud.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, some people don't realize the power of their tongue and the
Yeah. I
things that
could
they say, but then you don't pay attention to the people who are not Trek fans.
well, that's the thing is like I totally see where you're coming from. And I'm just remembering whoever's saying that is part of the 98%.
Oh,
I
how
just
you
I
know?
don't know. Like I don't know. Like if you're not and this is no shade on people not creating content at all.
Right,
I'm just, you know what? I'll give you an example. I was at my little nephew plays college football, and I was at his game this weekend. And this guy sitting next to me in the stands starts talking trash to one of the players for the other team, just calling him all kinds of names, acting real, just nasty. And so the player's like yelling at him, like, "I'm not even supposed to play right now." Da-da-da. Like he's defending himself, and this guy in the
right.
stands is just calling him names and yelling and stuff like that. And I'm looking, thinking, you're not even in the game. So how can you say anything to anyone? This player is actually playing. You, sir,
Right.
in the stands with me. We're not on the we didn't make the team, okay? We didn't make the team. We're not out there.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're warming the bench and you don't play a single minute on the game. You're on the
You
bench,
are
we're in the
on the
bleachers,
team.
okay?
Hmm.
Like we didn't make the cut. We didn't even try. We didn't try out. You know what I mean? So it's like you can have an opinion, but you
And
don't really need to share it with the
I
players
agree
because
with
like the
that.
players don't really need to hear what you have to say. So I kind of feel similar with people, when you get trolley comments or whatever, it's always a trolley comment from like user 11035. It's like you didn't even use your name, you didn't use your picture, you didn't use anything about yourself because God forbid someone like you says something disrespectful to you, like you couldn't handle it. But that just tells me that when people are trolling, they're in the stands. Like
Yeah.
they're not even on the field. Man, like you just can't even, sometimes you just got to be like, "Okay, all right, thank you for thank you for sharing." Like that has nothing to do with me. Your opinion has nothing to do with me.
The sci-fi thing don't work out for you, you make sure you get yourself a self-help channel because you have been spitting gems over here, sister.
Star Trek self-help. Yeah,
Oh my goodness, that would be
next
beautiful.
line of work. But I hear you though. Like I don't want to discount what you're feeling because I definitely
No,
and
I
that's a
mean,
thing
I'm
too that
actually taking what you're saying, and I'm internalizing that just the way I would internalize something negative that somebody said. So thank you, thank you. Um, I don't have a whole bunch left. Any questions? Is there any comments, concerns? You want to address
Well,
anybody in the chat?
I
Um,
can't see the chat. So
let me see. I'm gonna put the couple that's back up here. Um, Clarence said he
okay.
thinks Star Trek may have gotten the better end of the stick over Star Wars on the new shows.
I think Star Wars has twice as many new shows though. Like
But
Star Trek had 5 new ones. I think Star Wars had like 10 new ones or something like a huge number that it's just impossible to get a season 2. I think it's just
it's like,
well,
yeah,
just
it's
from
the
what I've seen it was
quantity.
like
They
it's the
went
quantity.
quantity over quality.
You know what it is? It's like the Marvel thing. Because when Marvel started doing the
Mhm.
shows, it was just
Yeah.
like show, and you're
Hmm.
just like I couldn't keep up. And I feel like that can do more harm than good. Like
Yep.
sometimes you want to just bombard the market, and sometimes you want to make people wait for something
Yep.
really good, and then everybody
Bull or
talks about
bear.
it, and
Yep.
they can't wait till the next one. So
Reinhardt. Hello there,
woo!
sir. Just
Thank you so
subscribe
much
to
for
your channel.
subscribing. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Clarence is saying he's kind of like me. His brain is mush.
That's why you have the collective brains of the
Yep.
audience. That's why. So we don't, not one of us has to keep in our head.
And
Reinhardt
of
does
course,
not believe Clarence.
no. Reinhardt is also he's a co-host on Clarence show that they do on I feel like I'm gonna cough. They do on YouTube and the podcast discussing Trek when I was talking about earlier. I'm gonna cough, but I'll turn off my mic real quick.
Yeah, that's fine. So to that point that Reinhardt just made about if I don't know something, it's okay. Like somebody else knows it. I love that. And something that one of my mentors told me back in college was if you don't ask the question, you'll never know the answer.
Hmm.
Right? So it's kind of like the only stupid question is the one that you don't ask. Because at
Yep.
the time it was like, oh, I don't want to ask a stupid question. And then they were like, how will you know the answer then? How are you ever going to find the answer if you don't ask? And it was like, oh yeah, I guess that's a really good point. Like, let it be a stupid question, but I'm getting smarter and smarter the more stupid questions I ask. So like, just ask. Yes, I love that, and I am always open to admit stuff that I don't know because the last thing
Hmm.
I want to do is make it seem like I know something that I don't know, and then get caught up in that, and then people are like, wait a minute,
Right.
right? Like I definitely want to be transparent with stuff like that. Like Tasha, to your point of I'm a fraud. It's like I'm not a fraud. I just don't know everything, and I don't need to know everything, and I don't want to know everything. Um, because I was talking to a friend of mine and I was like, oh man, it looks like I'm gonna have to watch every episode of every show because people keep pulling stuff out of, characters that I've never heard of. And he was like, no. He's like, if you want to watch the best 10 from like, this or that, just because these are the ones that people usually bring up over and over. But he was like,
Right.
there's just no reason. I was like, you know what, you're right. There's no reason that I have to personally know because I could just let them tell me. And then how much fun is that, right? When you get to tell people about like your favorite thing. So everybody wins. It's better
Mhm.
for the audience to participate than for me to be like the know-it-all with all the
You're sitting
information.
there like a professor at that point,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. hmm So I did want
Oh,
to say one more thing, unless you have more
sure.
comments to bring up.
No, nothing else.
Okay. So there was one thing you asked. You asked it before, and I think you asked it during this call, and I missed it. But you had said like, what are some of my favorite sci-fi films, movies, books, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, and I have so many, but I like narrowed it because I saw the as soon as I saw favorite sci-fi, I was like, oh, and then you were like strong female black characters. I was like, oh, okay, that's fewer. That's a lot fewer just because there's not as many of those, right?
I
Like,
mean, it doesn't even have to be. Right now we're on a female kick, so if you can think of somebody that you
oh,
could
I have some.
recommend,
Don't
yeah.
get me wrong, I
Oh,
have
oh,
some.
you
I'm
ready?
just saying, my huge bucket became a smaller bucket. That's all I'm
Okay.
saying. Which was helpful because then it's like, what are all my favorite things? And I have a lot of favorite things. So I picked three just to like constrain it.
Okay.
And the first is anything written by N.K. Jemisin is a must read. Like, go ahead and read it. Well, almost anything. She has her first couple of books, I didn't love, but all the other books I've ever read from her and her short stories, I didn't love either. But I didn't read them all, so I probably just need to give that another chance.
Give me I want to make sure that I'm thinking of the right author. Give me a couple of books by that
So,
author.
the book series I would recommend to anybody is called the Broken Earth trilogy, and it starts with the fifth season is the first book. I've got to look it up to see the names of the other two books,
Yeah.
but my word, this trilogy is so good. It takes place in this planet where there's a lot of like earthquakes and tectonic problems and stuff like that, which a big earthquake can cause all these other issues. But there are
Right.
some people who have the ability to sense and quell earthquakes. And so they're kind of like the mutants and they're looked down on in the society, but they literally save everyone's lives. And that's the story. Like the story starts with a huge, like world ending earthquake. That's where the book
Okay.
starts. And you're like, oh my gosh. And it follows the
Yeah,
story
this
of
is
this woman who has this power. And so she's hiding in her community because she doesn't want anybody to know she can do this because they will kill her. But the earthquake comes and she's able to like push it away from her village. So then everybody knows that she there's one of them amongst us. You know what I mean? And it's just like, oh, it's such a good story. And you see this woman and everything she goes through. And of course, it's kind of a, it's like a fantasy world, but there's a lot that I can relate to of this woman who feels like she's just fighting the world just to live, So good.
I
Um,
really wish. Let me see. Spell the last name for me.
Jemisin.
Okay. So this is not who I was thinking of, but okay. I have to bookmark her.
Like,
That
yeah,
sounds
pick
good.
pick up the Broken Earth trilogy, get it on Audible if you love audio things like I do. And it's so good. I've read a ton of her books, but those three books, like I keep going back through it again just to go through the like emotional experience of this character. Okay, so that's one. And then the other two are also books, but they are books turned into TV series. I think something of N.K. Jemison's is being turned into a show, but it's not a show yet.
Really?
So the first one is The Expanse, which is so good. Like the show season one's like a little bit rough, but once you get into season two, like okay, now we're going. It like picks up. But the books are so freaking good. There are 9 books in the series, and then a bunch of little novellas. So I think it's like 20 books altogether. But there's 9 main storylines, 9 main books, and you see this little crew on this ship and all the things that they're going through like over years and years and years of time. It's so interesting. It's anyway, so the character that I picked was Naomi Nagata, who is like the genius. Um, she's like one of those like savant type people, so she can
Okay.
like figure anything out really fast, and she's just like really clever, and she's really smart, and she's they all kind of have a past. Like this whole crew, they all have this dark past they don't really talk about, and they find themselves in this ship because their other ship gets blown up, and so now they're like trying to figure out who did it, and they're trying to get to safety, and they kind of bond and all this stuff. And she's just such a great character. The show is really good, and I love her in the show. But the books is where I fell in love with everyone. These two, it's James S.A. Corey is the author, and so it's two guys, but that's their pen name. And the way they world build and tell you what's going on with the internal lives of these characters is so dynamic and chilling and haunting. And there is one book that just goes with Naomi's kind of backstory, and you're just like, wow, like everything that she went through before she got on this ship, you're like, I get it now. I
Hmm.
get why she is the way she is. So good. Okay, and then the last one is Wheel of Time, which is
Oh,
a TV show also
yeah.
based off of books. So again, I watched the show, loved the show so much, binge watched everything, and then went and read the books while I was waiting for the next season to drop. I only read the first 3 books because there are like 16 books in that series, so
Yeah.
there's a lot of books, and maybe you don't necessarily need to read all those. But I will
I'm
say,
in the series too, though.
are you? Woo!
I'm there with you.
Those yeah those books are the books are like nuts. The books are
Yeah.
really really thick, but you get so much more story. I will say for that one, for The Expanse, I love the show, but the books I love even more. For Wheel of Time, it's the opposite. The books are great because you get so much story, but the show, I'm obsessed. And I'm
Yeah.
obsessed because the show has all the layers of diversity that are not in the book. Like, that
Hmm.
was just a creative choice. And I do think that Black Lives Matter had something to do with that to be like, let's not make every single character blonde and blue eyes. Like,
Right.
let's mix it up. And when you read in the book and it's describing the characters, all the characters are white except for like the monsters. Um, and the distinguishing thing is like blonde hair versus red hair versus black hair, and that's how you know the different sex they're from or whatever. But in the show, they have a lot of diversity in their
Hmm.
casting, and I love it. And in the show, the main character is Egwene, who is I just found this out today. She's an Aboriginal Australian because I thought she was from India, but she's an Aboriginal
Mhm.
Australian, and that's like their main lead. And it's all Egwene's story and what she's going through, and does she have this special magical power? And she has this boyfriend, Randall Thor, who's like, I just want what's best for Egwene because I'm obsessed with Egwene. It's pretty cute. But the book is like not that at all. The book is all about Randall Thor. That's all we're talking. You know what I
Oh,
mean? It's like
yeah.
Randall Thor is the book, and it's kind of like all these side characters around his life. And I love the choice that the producers, directors, whatever made for shifting it to a TV series to say, how about the man is not the point, like is not the lead.
Mhm.
How about we have a female lead? How about we say what would the story look like told from her perspective? And then even with the oh, I'm blanking on her name, but the main lady with the magic, like she was in the books,
Mhm.
so there was like a strong female character in that in the books as well.
Moira, what's her name? Moira? Forgot her name.
I'm totally blanking on it, but
Yeah, me too.
yeah, but like I love the way that the women are written in the show. They're very strong, capable, smart. They're not a damsel in distress. They're
Right.
not what I heard one person at Comic-Con say called Sexy Lamp. She's a comic book writer, and she said every time, I read these comics, the women are always reduced to being sexy lamps, meaning that if you replace the woman in the book in the comic with a sexy lamp, the story wouldn't change at all. Like the guy has to go save the sexy lamp. The sexy lamp gets kidnapped. The sexy lamp is strapped to the railroad tracks. Let's grab the sexy lamp. And she was like, if you can replace an entire character with a sexy lamp, you've written the story wrong. Like that
Right.
character does not have enough meat. And
Yep.
so anyways, what I love about Wheel of Time, the TV series, is there's no sexy lamps. All the women have
Everybody.
a purpose and a voice and
Mhm.
like agency, and they move the story along, and their choices matter, and they're never sitting around waiting to be rescued.
Right.
Even Egwene at one point gets kidnapped and she rescues herself, and you're like,
Yeah.
in like a really dramatic way.
The way
Watch
it
it.
went down.
Highly
Right.
recommend.
Yes. No spoilers, but it
No
is it
spoilers.
is
Highly recommend.
amazing. An amazing sequence. Reinhardt was asking Sci-Fi Savage. I was wondering, has she ever watched a Foundation? And if she has, what's her opinion?
Do you mean Foundation on Apple TV Plus? Because or if it's the Foundation, I don't know what that is, but if it's Foundation, yes, I have watched all of Foundation. I liked it. I liked it okay. I think for me it was a little slow. I'm not that patient of a woman. So when they're tell it was very beautiful. And my co-host Andrea, she was like, you have to watch this show. It's gorgeous. She loves a beautiful sequence. And so
Mhm.
it is gorgeous. Like even the intro sequence is like just the credits running is gorgeous. Everything they do is beautiful. But the storyline itself, for me, I was like, like, come on, like, tell
You,
what
yeah.
you gotta pull me in. Like, what's going on? So for me, it took a while to kind of get there. And by the end of, midway through the first season, I was like, okay, okay. And then
Mhm.
season two, I felt like wasn't as strong. So for a woman who's not that patient, that's not a good thing for me. However, however, it inspired me to read the book Foundation, which there are 5 books in that series. But the first 3 were written kind of like back to backish. Like the first one was written, it was really popular. 2 more were written, those were really popular, and then like 30 years later, the rest of them were written. I do not recommend reading those ones. Um, like just because I don't know what happened, but something happened. Those books are not the same. But the first 3 are good, and the first one actually is one of my favorite books of all time. Like I
Wow.
love that book. I listen to it at least once a month. I think the book's only like 4 hours long. It's not very long, but like I listen to books while I go to sleep, so I listen to
Mm.
it very often. It's one of my favorite books. The TV series and the book have almost nothing to do with each other, like nothing at all. So it's kind of like a bonus, right? Because if you watch the show and you like the show and then you read the book, like you'll like both. Um, I think
Mhm.
you might like both. You might not because they're not very similar. But anyways, I would recommend it because I enjoyed it. It's very much more about the politics and the people and stuff like that. I
One of
love
the
The
greatest
Expanse. It goes
shows.
right up there with Farscape. I have never seen Farscape, but Netflix keeps telling me I would like it. So
Yeah, I
I
keep
trust
hearing
Netflix.
about. And Reinhardt also said, love The Expanse because sometimes people are not who you think they are. You can think someone's a villain. Turns out maybe they're not good, but they're not necessarily a villain.
Yeah, and the thing with The Expanse, what I like about it is it's very gritty and real in the sense that people are so in The Expanse, we've got these 3 groups of people. We've got people who grew up on Earth. Um who are like the Earthers. We have people who grew up on Mars, who are the Martians. They're not aliens, they're humans, but they just grew up on
Mhm.
Mars. And they're kind of like the cowboys, and they have this rough and tumble life because they grew up on this harsh planet. And the Earthers are like kind of all soft and coddled because they grew up on like the home planet with all their resources. And then we've got the people in the middle who are supplying water to both planets who live on the asteroid belt, and they're called the Belters. And they're like the lowest dregs of society. Like they
Okay.
don't have their home, they don't have a home planet. They've grown up in the atmosphere. They've grown up in space, which messes with your bones, which actually is true. So they
Yes.
have like this long, stringy, like spindly look to them. So they look a little weird. They're treated like dirt. And so we end up getting kind of this civil war between the Earthers and the Martians and the Belters. And what I love about the show The Expanse is that the way people act is the way people act. Like it's so you're like, yes, that's exactly what people do. Yeah, that's exactly what someone would do if they were being oppressed. That is exactly what someone would do if they got mad. Like it's just so realistic. And even the technology, like all the spacey technology they use, you're like, I mean, they everything they eat is made from bacteria and like fungi and stuff that's made to taste like chicken or taste like whatever. And you're like, yeah, if people were living in space, that is exactly what they would eat. And then they put their whole meal and plate and tray and everything in a recycler. It gets recycled to make another meal. You're like, that's exactly how it would be in space. It's just like everything, you buy it. You just buy everything. And so, yes, to your point, you don't know who's good or who's bad because everyone's just human. And that's how humans are. Sometimes they're
Mhm.
good people who do bad things, or bad people who do good things, but they're not always so clear cut villains and heroes. And the crew of the Resinata, like the main crew, they're not good people either. Like the main people, that's we know they all have a history. We don't know what the history is when we start, but like they're the main guys. That doesn't make them good guys. And I love that because then you go like there's so many moral and ethical questions that are brought up. And that's why I love sci-fi. It allows us to answer those questions
Yeah.
in like a safe place.
I still haven't watched The Expanse. I've watched maybe some of the first episode, and I kind of fell off of out of the
Well,
first episode.
the first season, the whole first season of The Expanse for me was really slow. I didn't get into it to like the second to last episode. And the only reason I watched it for so long is because I was doing my hair and it took a long time. And my hands were all, with all this stuff, the product,
Yeah.
so I couldn't push the next button. So I was just like, oh, I'll just watch it. So I ended up watching like a whole bunch of episodes, and I was like, by the time I got to the end, I was like, okay, okay. And then it picked up. But I think again, if you want to try the audiobook version, that might be the better route to go because I enjoyed book one from the start, but I did not enjoy season one like almost at all. So sometimes
So
it's like
I,
that.
I just gotta have a little patience with season one, and I might be able to get it. So Clarence
Yeah.
also likes the
Wheel of Time.
Wheel of Time and has not watched Foundation yet. And
Uh,
Reinhardt said season two did fall off a bit for me also.
yeah, for Wheel of Time. Yeah, so for Wheel of Time, I don't know. I think it's just like maybe it's a bit of an acquired taste. I feel like it's the kind of thing like you're kind of like, "Ooh, this is cool." Or you're like, "What?" And I feel like that's it. There's not really a because if you watch that first episode and you're like, "What?" It's like that for the rest of the show.
Yeah.
Like what you just saw, that's the whole rest of it's still more like magic and, monsters and that's it. But if you watch the
Second
first episode and
season
you're
was
like,
so fantastic.
"Okay, that's the rest of the show." You're
Yeah.
going to enjoy it. So I think it's maybe like a hot or cold. If you fell off in the first season or you got into the second season, you weren't really feeling it, it's not really going to get better for you. I don't think. I mean, what do you think, Tasha? Like,
You know, yeah, if you didn't like the first season, there's no need to start the second one. If you gave the first season an honest shot, then the second season is not going to be any different than the first. So yeah,
yeah,
except
you
for that
can.
end, I was all in. So
I know, and I had
I
to wait for
thought
the
it
next
had a
season.
remarkable second season. Oh my goodness.
I binged all I binged the seasons. Like I couldn't stop watching. This was different from The Expanse, where I like had to watch it because I was doing my hair and I couldn't like touch the buttons. I wanted to watch Wheel of Time. I was like, I
Yeah.
need to stop watching. I need to go to sleep. But I was like, just one more, just one more,
And
one more
see, I
episode.
did the week by week thing, so I was just sitting around waiting for the next episode to come out.
Oh,
I don't have the patience to binge to wait to binge it. I
oh,
have to
see, I
watch
don't have the
week by week.
patience to wait week to week. I'm like, I'm like, what is this, 1992? We're doing this over? I'll just wait 10 weeks. I will wait 10 weeks and then I'll watch it in a weekend. But
That's
like
so
the week to week, especially because sometimes it's a bad episode, right? And you're like, oh man. But it's not like back in the day when you had 27 episodes, where if you have a couple bad ones, you're like, it's on for
yeah.
almost, it's like 10 months of the year you're going to see your show. Now it's not like that. You only got 10. And if you're
Yep.
waiting week to week and it's a bad one, you're like, oh man, I don't know. I feel like it hurts more.
See, and that's I guess the difference streaming age from the TV age. Because when I do nothing but I had to wait another week. Then I had to wait 3 months when
Yep. You had to wait during sweeps. You had to wait during
right.
summer. Then some shows had the nerve to be just summer only shows.
Yeah. So
So
see,
now we got to wait till next summer. What is this? I
it was a
remember that
different
being like,
time. It was. I thank you so much for hanging out with me today, Sharice.
yeah, thank you so
You
much
and
for
I
having
said
me.
half an hour, and look, we've been on here an hour, and I honestly think that we could talk longer, but I enjoyed having you. So once again, though, tell everybody the places that they can find you, and yeah,
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube and all the social media platforms, except for Pinterest, using at the Sci-Fi Savage. You can also find my podcast that I do with one of my best friends. It's called the TNG Podcast, a Star Trek show. You can find that wherever podcasts are found.
thanks again. Thank you, Clarence and Reinhardt, for hanging out with us, and whoever else was here. We did have a couple other people here, but they were quiet, and that's okay.
And thank you to the people who are watching in the future. Hi, future people. Thanks for watching the replay.
And thank you. And hopefully we can sit down again, maybe after the lower deck season, and you can
Oh,
give me your thoughts
yeah.
on that.
And
Huh?
we can both just do our now that the show is over, how do we feel? We can just do like a whole post mortem about it.
I'm gonna pencil you in. Thank you, and you guys have a good night. Okay, let me see. I don't know how to end. I don't know how to end.
We're not ending. We're going to still be here forever.
Okay, I ended
Oh,
it.
there it went.
Yay!